Hello, welcome back. My name is Grandmaster Daniel Gabali. Today I want to talk a little bit about chess coaching and is it worth paying £50 to get online coaching from a grandmaster? In my opinion it is, and I want to explain why. Firstly, number one, I feel like if you get like an hour or even 2 hours coaching from a professional player, that can benefit you to an enormous degree. You don't necessarily need to think about coaching more than that. You know, just that 1 or 2 hours could potentially steer you in the right direction. Just to give you an example, a friend of mine, Tristan Cox, he got coaching from a professional chess player based, I believe, in Eastern Europe, maybe in the Balkans. And he felt it benefited enormously because this person basically identified that Tristan was trying too hard, that he was kind of pushing himself, he was trying too hard on every single move to kind of, and the guy said, look, just chill out, just relax. There's certain situations where, you need to calculate, but he felt like he was just trying too hard on every single move. So often professional players can identify those kind of mistakes that are happening, and when people are doing the wrong thing. It's a very easy thing to fix as well. One of the things I emphasize as well is analysing your games, annotating your games. It always amazes me how with people I teach, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a subsequent video. I'm going to talk about how you annotate your games. One of the things that I've noticed really with the coaching is how little people look at their own games and how little analytical work they do with their own games, and effectively they become stunted because of that, because they don't really understand why they're going wrong and they never bother to kind of self-analyse. So that's one of the things I look at. And the other reason why £50 an hour is, I think, a reasonable price to charge is, partly there's people charging more than that. I'll talk about that in a minute, but you've also got to bear in mind that if you work in an average job, and I would say like an average job is not a very good job. A lot of jobs aren't very good. Like if I go into a shop now, I notice a lot of the people there, they look very miserable. They're working there all day. A lot of the work is very mind-numbing. We're running the till. It's very repetitive work. It's kind of mind-numbing. It's not very stimulating, but they're probably getting paid, I don't know, 10, 11, 12 pounds an hour. Not a lot, maybe more than that, maybe 14. I don't know what the pay is. A lot of them aren't getting very good pay, don't get me wrong, but on the other hand they're kind of sustained hours, right? So you might be working 40 hours a week. Now if I'm doing online coaching, I'm not necessarily doing even 10 hours a week. Currently I do about 2 hours a week, right? So 2 hours a week is only £100. Now I do have other sources of income as well, but that is the issue at stake here, that you're not necessarily getting that many hours. And actually, part of the problem with online coaching is that a lot of it is not very sustainable, in the sense that people will come in, some of them will have slightly false expectations, or slightly unrealistic expectations, I should say, about how much they can improve based on, a few lessons. And when they don't improve, or they don't have very good chemistry with the coach, it's then bye-bye. You never hear from them ever again, right? And there's no kind of rules or contracts in place that says, you have to specify that I have to do X amount of hours with that individual. They can effectively just go, look, we don't like you very much. We're going to move on elsewhere. The whole market, as far as chess coaching is concerned, is very cutthroat. There's an enormous number of people now doing the same thing, because if you're a professional chess player, you're often living in a country where possibly the expenses are quite low, and your outgoings might not be very high. Therefore, if you're charging, say, $25 an hour, that's more than enough to get by. But if I'm living in London, I can't afford to charge $25 an hour. I need to charge more. And I should be able to get away with it, because a lot of people living in London are quite well off. And actually, the schools in London are often where the decent money is. And I wish I'd got into schools a bit more. I did do some schools when I was younger, when I was about 19, 20, 21. I currently do a school in Alnwick as well, which I quite enjoy doing. But there's not many kids. The school pays me individually. Generally speaking, as a chess coach, you charge the kids, right? You don't charge the school, because the school might pay you £50 an hour or even less. If you charge the kids, let's say you get 20 kids, right? You're based in a school in London. You're charging them £10 per kid. Now I know there's schools in London where people are charging more than that, and they're getting more kids. You know, I know there's schools where people are getting £1,000 an hour. That sounds like a lot of money, right? But bear in mind, you're having to deal with like the parents. You're having to deal with the screaming kids. It's like a hellish existence. But yeah, you get paid well at the end of it. There's a lot of people who have been quite successful in London, doing that kind of thing. However, I never really pushed myself enough. I wish I had done. I kind of regret that now. As far as the online coach is concerned, it's a very competitive environment. There's a lot of people chasing a small amount of money, so it's quite difficult to get chess coaching, in my opinion, because you're competing with so many different people. It's not easy. But some people try to set up coordinated kind of websites where it would bring people together, because obviously realised that a lot of coaches were struggling to pick up students. A lot of students were probably struggling to pick up the right kind of coaches. So there was a website called CoChess, which was reasonably successful for a short period, but unfortunately the business plan failed, because people realised that actually CoChess was acting as a middleman. They were charging a fee. But some people were charging like £140, £150 per hour on that website. Obviously they could get away with it, right? Maybe most people were charging less, but some people were charging like unbelievable amounts. You know, when I saw that website, I was getting very few hits. I can't remember getting a single student through that website. I thought it was a bit of a scam. But eventually it broke down, because essentially they realised that people would just cut out the middleman. So they'd make these connections, associations with people, and they'd say, well, why do we need CoChess? We don't need CoChess to carry on. And the other problem, I think, as well with coaching, which other people pointed out, there's a lot of free material out there. So you're competing with people, if they want to improve at chess, they can go onto YouTube, they can watch a load of free videos. Okay, they might not have that personal connection with somebody, but they can still, you know, watch that material, and they feel like they can benefit from that. So I would say one of the advantages of hiring a chess coach over that is the fact that you are having that kind of connection with somebody, and they can essentially, I can essentially emphasize you and say, look, you know, I understand what you're going through. I have had similar experiences myself in the past. This is what I did to try and fix it, and so on. The other thing I wanted to talk about is how much does coaching actually benefit you as an individual. In my opinion, I think you have to be realistic about this. When I was younger, I didn't really have much chess coaching. I was essentially like a self-made chess player. I did have a little bit of help from people who would go to a local club. There were people kind of giving me advice and so on. I wish now that they'd give me career advice rather than chess advice. My life could have turned out in a better way, but unfortunately I got into chess, right? And funnily enough, even though I was an improving player to some degree, the thing that really kind of made me go to another level. So I used to go down to Charlton Chess Club, and we used to play Blitz Tuesday and Thursday nights. Some nights you turn up at this Charlton House, which is old Tudor building, and you turn up and there's no one there. And I was like, you know, I was really into the chess at that time, you know. Well, I still am, obviously, but you know, I didn't see the downside of being a chess player at that point. You know, obviously that came later, but You know, I would turn up and I would play against some players who were about 200 strength, 210 strength. You know, ECF, English or British Chess Federation, is it back then possibly? That was kind of rating that they were, and I was probably about 170, 160. I think around about when I was 13, I was about 150 level, right? But I was probably slightly better than that. But the thing that was where I kind of started shooting up, around about when I turned 13, because I brought this chess computer, which is Nigel Shult's Cytec chess computer, and I used to practice against it quite a lot. And my tactics suddenly went to another level. You know, so I suddenly went from 130 to 150 to 170 to 190 very quickly. You know, in a matter of a few years. So, and then 190, and then possibly, you know, then I went to 210 and then 220. So over like a space of about 6 or 7 years, I suddenly just shot up tremendously from about the age of about 13 onwards. So I kind of had a period where I was about 11 till 13, where I was kind of stuck in a kind of, you know, I wasn't really improving. But once you know, my tactics took off and I started to believe in myself, that's when I really broke through. But I was much younger then. So it's much easier for younger players to improve. You know, so I do think that chess coaching can benefit younger players, probably more than adult players. However, I do think that chess coaching can benefit adult players, as I've already explained in the video. You should have been listening, right? Getting angry again. As already explained in the video. So I notice I've got a bit of a double chin. I think this kind of thing is accentuating my kind of double chin. I'll just move up my hair as well. Anyway, yeah, I need to lose a bit of weight. Probably about a couple of stone overweight. Yeah, as I forgot what I was talking about now. But yeah, I mean, essentially, yeah, chess coaching is, it can be beneficial. And it can be very useful, I think. But I think you do have to be realistic. It's not a fix-all. You know, essentially the improvement will come from yourself. And chess coaches are really like a guide, right? I do think that the standard of chess coaching, and, you know, I've talked about this in these videos recently, in my doom-mongering videos, doom-laden videos about the state of British chess. I think that's part of the reason why we've declined as a chess nation, is that our chess coaching has not been on a standard with countries like Russia. Now, we had a golden generation of players who were very self-driven. We had people like Tony Miles, Nigel Shult, John Spielman, John Nunn. Very talented players, very driven players. Latterly, we had people like Luke McShane, well, Michael Adams, of course. Luke McShane, who I believe is probably the most naturally gifted chess player we've ever had in this country, right? And we've had people like that, which is fantastic, right? David Howe, another fantastically talented player. Gawain Jones, also another amazingly talented player. We've been very lucky in that respect. So I think that worked for a certain period, but the problem is once that talent pool dries up, which it seems to have done, then you're left with the reality that our coaching is not on a par with some of the top countries. So I think this is part of the reason why they're bringing in players from abroad to try and improve that situation. I remember reading about Ding Liren recently, and one of the reasons why he became world chess champion was way back in 1975. This Malaysian businessman had this idea that he wanted to improve Asian chess. China at that point had no, world-class players at all, really. They only came through like in the 1980s and so on. And so effectively they built a kind of Chinese school of chess, which is modelled on the Russian school of chess, where essentially people are approaching chess in a very professional way. There's very targeted material there. We haven't had that in this country. Often I'll look at, I mean, I'm not saying the coaching in this country hasn't been good. I'm sure it has been very good. I'm just saying it's not really been on a par with the absolute top countries. And that is part of the reason why we've fallen behind. And that worked before when we had these very driven individuals. But now that we don't have that, we're kind of exposed, really. And yeah, I mean, I look at players who've come through junior coaching over the last 30 years, and often you look at their opening repertoire, and their opening repertoire isn't really good enough. You know, a lot of it's based on traps, and, you know, they're avoiding mainline Sicilians as white and stuff like that. And you feel like to really get to that, you know, top level, you need something a bit more. So, yeah, these are some of my thoughts on coaching, and I feel like I need to be slightly more professional in my outlook on the whole coaching thing in order to improve my financial situation. I wish I was better at organising all this kind of stuff. But I do think that £50 an hour is reasonable value for a GM. I know it sounds like a lot, but bear in mind you're not talking about a lot of hours. You might only be talking about 1 or 2 hours per week, maybe even less. And even 1 or 2 hours with a GM will probably help you to send you in the right direction, if nothing else. Somebody also had the idea, actually, which I thought I'd mention in this video, that some of the better players in this country could benefit from something like Killer Chess Coaching, which is an online school run by Jacob Agard. Sam Shanklin works for him as well. I think that's very good advice, because I think we don't really have a very professional or a centralised outlook in this country. Somebody made this point to me, I think Mark Hebden, a few years ago, and he said part of the problem why he was amazed that some of the younger players didn't really work with each other, right? You know, they don't really get together and kind of work with each other, which you would do in other countries. Like India, obviously part of the reason why these people like Pragananda and Gukesh, you know, no doubt they're fantastically talented, that's very obvious, but they also work with each other. You imagine you have a racing stable where the horses are racing with each other. They're going to bring each other on, right? It's the same with chess. They're going to bring each other on because they're very talented. They've got different outlooks on chess. So they're bringing something forward. It's like a pot puree. They're bringing something to the table. Everybody's bringing something different to the table. If you're having to work by yourself constantly, I think this is one of the reasons why I'm quite proud of myself in some ways, because I left school when I was 15. I didn't get any qualifications. And I basically drove myself forward in chess to the degree where I got into the England team, which is pretty much, you know, near the pinnacle of chess. I achieved a grandmaster title with all these handicaps where I didn't have a university education. I'm not saying that helps you as a chess player, but I'm saying, you know, I kind of had that kind of, you know, it's not like I came from like a, you know, my parents were both teachers, so I came from a middle class background, right? But I kind of had these kind of, you know, setbacks in my normal life. So the fact that I managed to be, you know, I was driven enough to become a grandmaster is something I'm quite proud of. But unfortunately, I'm now in this situation where I don't have any kind of support network. And this is where I'm kind of at a situation now where I'm thinking about even just getting out of chess completely and getting some other kind of career, because my yearly income is pretty low. And unless you do coaching to the degree where, like, you know, I talked earlier about coaching schools, you're getting £1,000 an hour and stuff like that. If you're in that kind of business, and then you can make a decent living. But unfortunately, I'm not in that situation. So my yearly income is pretty low. So unless I can beef that up considerably over the next couple of years, I'm going to think about getting out of chess completely and trying to get into some other career before it's too late. Anyway, these are some of my kind of thoughts on online coaching. I'm interested to hear your feedback. I'd like to hear comments that you've had or experiences you've had with coaching in general, and whether you think it's worth paying £50 an hour for a chess grandmaster to give you some coaching.